a loser commoner who got caught and was about to be executed by a bunch of nobles for being weak. One of the nobles tells him that he will grant his wish before taking his life. He asks the commoner boy to strike him with his best magic spell. However, his spell is so weak that it hardly causes any damage to the noble. The noble decides to end his misery and shoots a fireball back at him to show what real magic is. The boy is screaming in pain as the flames burn him to ashes, but he quickly smiles at the amazing magic of a noble. He wishes he had learned more about magic and mastered it while alive. The next moment, when his eyes open, he finds himself in an unfamiliar room surrounded by maids. He looks at his hands and realizes they are quite tiny. He then accidentally activates a magic spell that bursts through the roof of the castle immediately, surprising himself with how insanely strong his magic is even though he is just a toddler. A town carrier runs through the kingdom, announcing the birth of the 7th prince of the kingdom of Saloom, Prince Lloyd. As time passed, the 7th prince, Lloyd, grew up. He specialized in playing hide and seek with his maids, making them run out of breath. He just wanted to go read magic books, but Silpha, a maid, found the prince. It turned out that it was time for swordsmanship lessons. They engage in a sparring session at an incredibly fast pace, where they attack and counterattack faster than a man could blink. And on first glance, it looks like the prince was able to hold his own against Silpha, but Lloyd was a cheater. He copied Silpha's skills and movements with magic, but couldn't compensate for the physical and body shape differences. Lloyd then buffed magic into the sword to extend it and turned his body into floating in the air, but still failed. While Lloyd uses his levitation magic to surprise her from a different angle, he decides to take a boost from the fountain to finish the fight. But Silpha calmly blocks his sword before telling him that he is cheating and slams him to the ground and smacks him on the head. She's surprised he thought she wouldn't notice his cheating skills. However, she's amazed he was able to use 2 spells at once, which most court magicians can't even manage. While bathing the prince, the maids accidentally talked about the demon grimoire in the forbidden book in the basement of the castle. This attracted Lloyd. While they were struggling with each other to see who got to sleep with the prince, Lloyd, with a face full of excitement, quietly slipped away. At night, sure enough, Lloyd secretly hid and went to the basement. He broke the seal on the door and went in. He can't believe he never knew such an exciting section existed underground in the castle. Immediately, a demon emerges from the book, and he tells Lloyd he's impressed he was able to break the seal. Lloyd wonders who the demon is, and the demon introduces himself as Grimoire, and Lloyd realizes that he's the demon of the forbidden book. Grimoire tries to convince Lloyd to free him from the seal, and he offers to give him as much gold as he wants. But Lloyd isn't impressed with the demon's creation magic. He's disappointed Grimoire just molded some dust into gold. Grimoire becomes desperate, and he offers to teach Lloyd some ancient magic that has been lost to time. This time it made Lloyd excited with wide eyes. Lloyd didn't think much. He immediately unsealed it. But in response to his expectation, the demon played a trick and threw a destructive black lightning bolt, so powerful that the basement was about to collapse. He was ready to destroy the kingdom when the dust gets blasted away, as he notices a huge magical barrier in place that protected Lloyd from the destruction, as he honestly tells the monster that he has never seen this magic before. The demon is pissed by this, and he hits Lloyd with more powerful ancient magic spells, but none of them can penetrate through Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd is so fascinated by the magic that he decides to try it for himself. He takes the remnants from his barrier and holds them on his finger so he can observe their composition. Suddenly, Grimoire grows a second face and starts chanting destructive spells, but Lloyd tells him to stop and to show him his best defensive magic. Lloyd chants a spell and shoots a magic ball so strong that it basically turns the entire barrier into a lava pit, defeating the Grimoire. Then Lloyd used magic to restore the ruined room, while the Grimoire knelt on the ground and worshipped Lloyd as its master. The Grimoire pledges his services to Lloyd, and he asks to serve as Lloyd's familiar. Lloyd immediately agrees, but Grimoire believes Lloyd sees him as a lab rat. Grimoire transforms into a little cute demon with the aim of buttering Lloyd up so he can take him down unawares. Lloyd invites him to jump into his coat and decides to use the opportunity to attach himself to Lloyd and take over his body. But as soon as he touches Lloyd, He's surprised by how powerful Lloyd's mana is. He decides to be obedient to Lloyd because he can't see himself taking control of him. The second prince, Albert, invited Lloyd to practice magic shooting. Albert was known as a prince of both literature and martial arts, with a high chance of succession. The next turn belongs to Lloyd, who walks up to the area but realizes that he needs to hide his true powers. So he intentionally decides to just clip all of the targets one by one with his fireball instead of hitting them in the middle. The old officials who followed all sneered, but Lloyd didn't care because the throne had no value to him. Albert tells everyone to follow him upstairs, but tells Lloyd to play and practice as much as he wants. Lloyd is overjoyed at this opportunity, as now he can truly use his magic to the fullest. He then turns towards Grimm and tells him that he wants to try his special magic where he used 2 different spells at once. The ultimate fiery ball and the violent water ball merged. The demon overloaded and foamed at the mouth. A earth-shattering move was created, shooting straight into the sky. On this side, Albert knew that Lloyd was pretending to miss. He planned to use Lloyd in the future as a sage, so his power would be stronger. At this time, the demon in Lloyd's hand was also terrified, because the sky had been shot through and the day had become night. The next day, Grimm brings the newspaper to show a picture of the hole in the sky on the front page. But Lloyd's attention is turned towards the article about an adventuring party gaining lots of loot inside of a dungeon. This makes him decide that he wants to go to a dungeon, so he takes out a piece of acorn and uses his magic to create an exact replica of himself, which mirrors everything that Lloyd does. After that, he takes Grimm back into his arm and flies off to find a dungeon. But it turns out that half of Grimm's soul is magically transmitted inside the clone back at the castle, so they can communicate. Lloyd stops for a while because he has no idea where the dungeon is. Suddenly, they notice a girl escaping from a group of orcs. They go to a mountaintop to observe, but to their amazement, the girl uses a specific breathing method to generate energy and bursts through the first couple of orcs, destroying them one by one before blasting the final orc with a Kai blast that Lloyd had only heard about in books. The girl immediately notices him and rushes up the mountain thinking that he is an enemy. But in that time, Lloyd uses his imitation magic to make himself look taller and older. The girl immediately fell in love at first sight and introduced herself as Tao, a B-rank warrior from another continent. Lloyd introduces himself as Robert and asks whether she knows the location of any dungeons, and to impress him, she agrees to party up with him. They go inside the dungeon, where she destroys any monster that comes in front of her, while Lloyd collects glowing rocks. At night, Lloyd was taught by Tao about Kai Gong, a type of combat technique. Before she finishes speaking, Lloyd already starts trying to copy her technique just by looking and manages to feel a new sort of energy inside him, which makes him really happy. Tao, seeing him like this, promised to teach him all the knowledge she knew about technique. Later, she brings him deeper into the dungeon, where a monster wolf attacks them, but she quickly kills it with her Kai blast. Lloyd is quite impressed by this, and they both move to the center of the room to finally see what's inside the chest. Tao said that this was a low-level dungeon, so there probably wasn't anything valuable in the chest. Suddenly, a dark slash swept across. Luckily, Lloyd pulled her out in time. A huge skeleton emerged from beneath the treasure chest. Lloyd curiously asks what kind of monster this is, but Tao lies, saying it's just a silly monster. Then she decides to use a blow and pushes Lloyd out, knowing that this blow could break a few of Lloyd's bones. But there's no other way, because if he stays, Lloyd might die. At this point, the Lick begins to attack, creating countless dark mirror shards flying towards Tao. She still doesn't understand why such a powerful Lick appears in this low-level dungeon. Meanwhile, Lloyd is still in the air, getting blasted away. While he wonders why Tao did this and uses his barrier ability to slow himself down, he looks at his hand and tries to talk to Grimm, only to realize that something went wrong as Grimm seems exhausted and tells Lloyd to come home as soon as possible. Back in the boss room, Tao is somehow managing to destroy and block all of the Lick's attacks, but has gotten severely injured in the process. She realizes that if this keeps up, there is no way she will be able to survive. Suddenly, The Lick begins to speak and tells Tao that her magic seems to be one of the lowest forms of magic and claims that he defeated and ate a Kai magic user once, and he tasted horrible. Lick asks her about Lloyd, claiming that there was something different about him as his reaction time was insanely good as he saw through the surprise attack. She takes a deep breath and starts attacking the monster and wants to prove to the demon that it was wrong to underestimate her technique, landing a barrage of hits while thinking about how she has been working her ass off and training every single day since she was 5 to reach the position she is. She pushes herself one last time and breaks through the barrier, only to find that the Lick has disappeared. She falls to the ground out of exhaustion while the Lick speaks up from behind, claiming that her strength is even weaker than the magic present in his single finger. He claims that she wasted his time and shoots a massive magical shard at her. Just when she thought it was finished, his shard broke into 100 pieces. As it turned out, Lloyd arrived at the last minute and saved Tao's life with his barrier. He praises her on her performance and promises to take over and finish the monster. The Lick begins chanting a spell, but before he can attack, Lloyd uses a Kai technique to swiftly run behind him. The Lick is taken aback by Lloyd's speed as he takes a deep breath and hangs upside down on the rocks, protected by his barriers, while the Lick attempts to land attack after attack, only to fail each time. At this moment, Lloyd was contemplating a method to combine Kai and magic. He inhaled deeply to fill his lungs and then combined it with rapid magic, enhancing the rotation speed of the Kai inside. Lloyd realizes that his barrier is blocking the flow of air, so he decides to break his own barrier. This pleasantly surprises the Lich, who immediately shoots a bunch of magic blasts at him. But Lloyd jumps away, dodging the attacks one by one. He finally gets the hang of it and merges his Kai with his mana to create an incredibly strong magic attack. He dodges some more attacks, before throwing the magic attack around him to destroy all of Lick's attacks, surprising both Tao and the monster. Lloyd is not done yet and creates some more magic razor blades and starts shooting them at the Lick, who tries to block his attacks. Lloyd starts making his blades thinner and sharper, cutting through the barrier alongside the Lick, destroying him once and for all. After that, they look through the treasure chest only to find an old knife inside. Lloyd expressed his intention to keep this knife. Tao agreed. Then the chest slowly sank into the ground. According to Tao, after the dungeon was cleared, everything would be buried by the ground. But Lloyd held onto the chest tightly, not letting it escape. He realized it seemed this chest was the core of the dungeon. Lloyd didn't expect to have caught the chest, but Tao was panicked and told them both to quickly run outside. Sure enough, after they both got out, the dungeon had turned into an empty plot of land. Lloyd instantly remembered that he needed to return. Then Lloyd flew away, but Tao forgot. She hadn't asked for contact information yet. Lloyd returned to the palace and discovered Grimo's substitute laying flat on the ground. It turns out that Silpha wanted to train him, but she realized that he was much weaker than before, so she decided to train her all day long. Later that day, he shows Grim the knife he discovered in the dungeon. Claiming that it appears to have been enchanted by certain spells, he instantly grabs some water. It utilizes a specific spell to gradually remove all of the knife's magical enchantments. Grim informs him that magical enchantments are uncommon and difficult to perform, but Lloyd chooses to learn how to enchant weapons himself and purifies the water carrying the enchantment, only to discover that he requires oil, silver, and some weapons to practice. He asks his father for some coin, which he gladly provides, but Silpha informs Lloyd that she will give him some oil, only if he can score a hit on her. They begin sparring, and Lloyd does his best to match Silpha's talents, even using his acceleration method to emerge behind her before attempting an attack. Grim and Lloyd go into their secret dungeon, and then melt down all the silver coins before using the oil to imbue magic inside of them, creating a solution that can help them in enchantment. Albert instantly tells his guard to give him some weapons, and the guards lay down all of their weapons. Lloyd and Grim take the weapons down into the dungeons and start applying enchantments. However, the steel is not strong enough and breaks into hundreds of pieces. Lloyd refuses to accept failure and continues to attempt, breaking multiple weapons. Finally, he returns to Albert and reports that he was able to successfully enchant 50 of the 120 swords he received, while the rest broke. Albert is beyond surprised, as even the ranked enchanters only have a success rate of 10%. The knight thinks that he is lying about the enchantments and puts his sword back in his sheath. However, the sheath breaks in half in an instant. Albert is really impressed and asks Lloyd if he wants to go on a monster hunt with him. Lloyd eagerly agrees. The next morning, Albert and his party leave from the castle in a carriage. Suddenly, Silpha detected an ambush. It was the kobold monster with sharp magic equipment. Silpha immediately jumps off while the knights form a protective wall around the princes. Lloyd pretends to be surprised by the attack, but Grimm claims that he knew about the presence of these monsters ever since they entered the forest. A knight swung his sword and unfortunately cut the kobold in half. Even Lloyd and Albert widened their eyes, whose weapon is so sharp. The soldiers were chopping the beast like chopping vegetables while expressing their astonishment. Albert starts praising Lloyd for enchanting the swords, while Silpha also praises him while standing on top of a mountain made up of monster corpses. Suddenly, a stray kobold emerges and tries to attack Lloyd. But thankfully, Tao appears out of nowhere and kicks the monster away. She begins looking around for Lloyd since she suspects that someone is using Kai magic. But because Lloyd is in his child form, she is unable to figure it out. Silpha telling Tao to back off and not to touch Lloyd so casually. They were about to have a catfight when Albert saved the day by assuring Tao that she can accompany them to the lake if she wants. Out of fear of Tao searching for him, Lloyd sneaked into the tent to hide, only to find himself almost suffocated between two mountains. It turned out Silpha was changing clothes and even planned to sleep with him that night. Lloyd tried to turn away, only to be caught firmly between Silpha's thighs. When Tao opened the tent, he stumbled upon a scandalous scene. Subsequently, the two women began to argue loudly, much to the amusement of the soldiers who cheered them on. Immediately, there's a huge blast as a giant monster appears out of nowhere, making Lloyd really happy, as this is the first monster that he saw in a forest. The giant wolf immediately rushed to bite. Tao also helped these soldiers. At this time, Albert stood out and launching a flaming sphere attack, instantly burning the ferocious wolf with terrifying firepower. The soldiers hailed the prince as a hero, but he immediately credited this achievement to Lloyd, because it was his magically enhanced sword that made Albert's attacks so terrifyingly powerful. Grimm calls Lloyd and tells him that he just remembered that the chapel on top of the hill was used to trap a pretty strong demon a long time ago. The dead monster gets up once again, and a demon crawled out of the wolf's mouth and introduced himself as Pazuzu. He then commands a huge horde of monsters to kill every single person present here. The monsters immediately attack Albert and his party, who try to stand their ground, but to their surprise, their attacks are pretty useless because the beasts regenerate immediately. Grimm guessed that it was because Pazuzu had used a spell to change their nature to make the monsters think he was their parent and obey him. He even used magic to manipulate like a thread transmitting healing magic power. Suddenly, everyone feels a wave of dread as they realize that Silpha seems to be serious right now. Silpha cursed the demon as a monkey with a stink mouth. This pisses him off, and he tries to attack her. But to everyone's surprise, Silpha not only dodges the attack, but chops off all 4 limbs of the beast. Pazuzu becomes irritated by this and begins using all of his mana to regain the werewolf's limbs. Albert notices that the other monsters have stopped regenerating completely, implying that if Silpha continues to deliver damage to the main body, they would be able to defeat smaller monsters without allowing them to regenerate. Meanwhile, Grimm had finished teaching Lloyd the new magic, but unexpectedly, the flower that Lloyd created even had a fragrance. Then Silpha went to borrow a sword with magical enhancement from a soldier. Just holding a sword with the scent of the owner's magic made her start to get all wet. Pazuzu decides to play some mind games with her and starts running circles around Silpha, trying to confuse and provoke her, and it seems to be working as she gets mad with rage. Pazuzu takes advantage of this moment and jumps in to attack. However, Silpha appears in front of him while inside the beast's mouth. Then she slashed again with twin swords, cutting the wolf to pieces. She continued her destructive combo, slashing 4 more times, separating the demon from the wolf, slamming him down to the ground, shocking every single person around as they shake with fear. Silpha tells him to get ready to taste the cold touch of the sword that was enchanted by the boy who he threatened to kill. The demon was beaten so badly by Silpha, but strangely, the demon put its face down and smiled, which confused Silpha. On the other side, the soldiers were gradually subduing the monster and celebrating. Suddenly, the ground shook, and Silpha also trembled. It turned out that the demon was breathing something into the ground. Pazuzu gets up and stretches his wings, and he hits her straight in the face, blasting her off into the sea. The demon flies up and claims that whoever inhales the demonic gas loses all their strength and simply gets knocked out. Silpha tried to hold the sword down and keep herself awake. She didn't expect that this old demon's breath not only stinks, but also carries such a damn magic. The demon rushed to attack Silpha. Thankfully, Tao reaches just in time to block the attack for her. Tao asks Silpha whether she can stand up, but Silpha advises her to mind her own business, as she can handle it on her own before she falls over into the water unconscious. At that moment, Tao began to breathe unevenly, her body heating up, and the demon slithered behind her, asking softly, "Why haven't you fallen under my control yet?" Tao immediately lashed out with a kick, but the demon caught her move, grabbing her leg and lifting her abruptly. Pazuzu noticed she was using a unique breathing technique to keep the poison out. Pazuzu asked her, "Why don't you run away? Or perhaps you want to become my subordinate?" Tao got angry, claiming that she would never become a slave for someone as ugly as him. She jumps up and then uses one of her most powerful spells that he has blasted into the water. She needed to quickly adjust her breath. But as soon as she set foot on the ground, a mouth opened. Tao quickly used her own 2 hands to hold this mouth from collapsing. Pazuzu approached her. Then he opened his mouth and continued to pump out the dominating gas. Tao couldn't resist anymore. She had inhaled the gas. Tao said that she had felt that handsome guy right here, and he was shining like the sun. Pazuzu tells the dog to gulp her down, and the monster swallows her alive. He picks the unconscious body of Silpha out from the water, claiming that she killed a lot of her minions and will have to pay for that by becoming his minion herself. Meanwhile, Lloyd is still playing in the background and asks how he managed to control the monsters. Pazuzu gloats about how he killed the parents of these monsters while they were still pups and then used his magic smoke to take control over their bodies and make them follow him. He suddenly remembers that no one should be aware enough to speak, which scares him, and turns around to see Lloyd playing with one of the dogwolves. He asks Lloyd how he gets through his smoke so quickly. Pazuzu discovers Grim is a demon and asks if he is guarding the tiny kid, before mocking him for being a babysitter. This irritates Grim, but he knows Pazuzu won't see the light of day anyway. Pazuzu laughs and sends in his demon dogs to tear the kid apart. Lloyd starts fixing his mana output and uses it to create a warm and gentle bed of flowers. The puppy remembered his kind mother, remembered her kiss full of love. But very quickly Pazuzu felt something was wrong. All his monsters were happily rushing to Lloyd's arms. Then Lloyd told the wolf to spit her out. Lloyd covered Tao body while she is sleeping. Pazuzu released a super extreme miasma and wanted to suppress that scent. However, all the dog wolves attack Pazuzu with incredible speed and start tearing him to shreds with their pack hunting techniques. Pazuzu was bitten several times, but he was really furious, grabbed the heads of 2 wolves, and smashed them together. He gets so pissed at them not following his orders that he goes down and starts kicking one of them in the body. Suddenly, the entire area goes dark as Lloyd uses his domain expansion, leading Pazuzu to stand like an idiot, frozen by fear. When Lloyd tries to trap him in a shield, he barely escapes. This confuses Pazuzu at first, but then he realizes that this isn't even a fight to Lloyd, and he is simply having fun and wants to trap him in a cage like a lab animal so that he can experiment with his strong magic on him. He starts escaping the area as fast as possible, while Lloyd keeps creating barriers, pinballing the demon all over the place. Pazuzu feels this is too much as he tries to run, but is captured in the end. The demon tries to leave, but he can't. Lloyd combines spells from all of the elements before multiplying them by 100 and deploying them with triple the intensity, completely blasting the demon inside the barrier for 30 straight minutes just to see how much damage he can take. After watching for a while, he finally releases the demon from the barrier, who looks completely withered and half dead as he stands in the air unmoving. The demon starts turning to ash while Lloyd realizes that everyone is starting to wake up, so he immediately runs away to avoid any suspicion. He meets up with Albert, and when Albert asks what happened to the demon, Lloyd lies that an incredible magician named Robert killed it and ran away. A few days later, Albert and his company return to the kingdom to much fanfare, where they are presented to the king, who congratulates them on their ability to stand up to such an immensely powerful monster. Albert claims there were two other people, Tao and the mystery magician Robert. Tao wanted to find Robert, so she entered the jungle and didn't return. Albert straightforwardly stated that he wanted the king to grant Lloyd the right to run for the throne. The king was quite pleased to hear this, but also asked Albert, "Isn't it that way you will have more competitors?" Albert boldly said this to find the best king for the kingdom. A talented child like Lloyd is also a very good choice. There is no reason to refuse him. The king immediately wanted to confirm with Lloyd about this. Lloyd immediately refused. Then he picked up his stick and ran out to the playground. His lively demeanor was quite something. Suddenly, a pure white dog rushed towards him. It turned out this wolf had followed Lloyd when he left the forest. Lloyd was very happy about this. They went to Botanical Tower, where there were countless green trees and colorful flowers. A girl rushed at him at supersonic speed, pressing on him from behind. It was the sixth princess, Alice. Then everyone had tea. Alice noticed a cute magical beast following Lloyd. She sat down and began to pet the beast. Strangely, the beast did not resist at all. Lloyd wanted to stay to learn more about Alice's beast-taming magic. Indeed, she had called a creature she was raising. It seemed to be a giant fox. It had silently appeared from behind and stolen Silpha's hairpin. Both were horrified looking back, not knowing when this magical beast had appeared. Alice introduced it as Ruru of the Finra species, a higher-level magical beast. The only thing Lloyd didn't understand was when she had ordered this magical beast to come. It seemed that Alice had given the order without moving. Lloyd felt this was wonderful. Lloyd rushed up and asked her to teach him. Alice did not hesitate and happily shared right away. The method of giving orders was love. Then she demonstrated, emitting love around her. Immediately, countless magical beasts jumped to hug her. Lloyd realized that his sister had unconsciously controlled the beasts by sharing her thoughts. She was indeed a genius. With his ability, Lloyd observed this. The energy flowed from Alice's head to the heads of other beasts. It was not a command, but a kind of imagination. Lloyd started doing the same and aimed at his pet. Indeed, it understood and ran around as Lloyd requested. Lloyd happily pampered his dog, Shiro, because it did exactly right. Later, Lloyd, Silpha, and Shiro return home, and Silpha wants him to train with her immediately. Suddenly, Albert comes to his rescue. He claims that he wants him to meet someone. That someone is the fourth Prince Diane, and Lloyd is a bit taken aback to see him. They visit Diane's blacksmith workshop, which he wants to talk to Lloyd about the sword enchantments he did earlier, which is why he wants to see him in action. Lloyd started using a pen and dotted magic ink containing a strengthening solution. Then he inlaid a bunch of magic, extremely fast. Diane immediately felt stunned, and Albert was sweating. Diane was completely convinced. He began to admire his own brother, so his dream could be realized. That was to create the strongest magic sword. The magic sword is different from the weapon that only deploys simple magic spells. Diane does not have magic. He always dreams of creating a magic sword to be able to use magic freely, even creating a country specializing in magic swords. Lloyd doesn't care about his brother's dream, but he is interested in the production process and gladly agrees to help him. This time they will enchant the skill of the flaming fireball into the weapon. The difficulty is that this skill needs 15 enchantment beats, but the limit of the weapon is only 5 beats. That's no problem for Lloyd, and he compresses the high-level spell into just 2 parts. He creates the enchantment and puts it on the red-hot steel slab, which shatters under the weight of the complex spell. Diane suddenly notices Silpha and Shiro staring at them from outside and invites them in to help them. The new enchantments Lloyd creates are somewhat more stable, but as Diane tries to fold and shape the sword, the molten steel mass breaks yet again. Grim approaches Lloyd and shows that the enchantment ink is of extremely low quality. Even Diane confesses that he purchased it because it was cheap. Lloyd is not pleased about this. He utilized the purification spell on the essence to reveal its constituents and discovers that the amount of monster core in it is insufficient to make a magic sword. Diane does not have any monster cores lying around either. In that situation, Lloyd believes he needs to clear a dungeon in order to obtain it. Silpha was thinking the same thing and recommended they go dungeon hunting. The next day, they went to the fake adventurer guild and Silpha felt nostalgic because she was originally an adventurer. The receptionist, Katerina, came to welcome them. After receiving the information, next, Lloyd needs to put his hand on the magic ball to determine his rank. Lloyd starts to feel nervous because it is very likely that when touching this ball, it will explode. So Lloyd starts trying to suppress his magic power to be very small. The result is he achieves rank E in all stats, but in it the magic power is rank A. The adventurers were laughing at him for being too weak. After finishing, Silpha started to register to go to the dungeon, while a bearded guy was tempting her to leave the kid and go with him. But one side of his beard was shaved off by Silpha. Katerina announced that this girl was the Silver Blader, causing everyone to cover their mouths in horror. But after registering again, Silpha was demoted to only rank C. They need at least one B rank to go to the dungeon. Just at this time, Tao appeared. She winked at Lloyd and expressed her desire to help them. Silpha immediately wanted to leave. Tao shouted, "Stop!" It turns out that after that time, I couldn't find Robert. So Tao went to fight monsters in the dungeon, fighting while looking for Robert. Now she is a rank A adventurer. Then they entered the dungeon, and Shiro was gnawing at the ogres inside. Easily cleared the dungeon and found the treasure chest. On the other hand, Albert goes to check up on Diane and learns that they can resume their work when Lloyd returns in a few days. This worries Albert a little because a war is approaching them rapidly, and he wanted to have as much help as possible before it starts. Diane asks him to just wait a little longer, and then they can mass-produce magic swords. They brought this new sword out to the training field. Diane and Albert are blown away because they didn't expect it to be this powerful. Lloyd thinks that he should tone down things a bit from the next time. At night, Lloyd can finally relax in his bed after a long day's work. He suddenly notices the presence of a strange object in the garden. He tries analyzing what it is, but it seems like a hole in space. The assassin hides behind the fountain and keeps an eye on Lloyd's room. But then he arrives right next to her. The assassin loses her cool and runs away. But Lloyd has already created a barrier around them. He taunts the assassin, asking why she is trespassing in his home. The assassin removes her cloak and apologizes to Lloyd for using her special move on her. Her body releases a lovely, flowery smell. Lloyd begins to feel dizzy and numb as he inhales it. He realizes it is poison and casts a purifying spell to eliminate its effect. But the lowly assassin levels up her poison attack and tells him that there is nothing that can purify her poison. The assassin affirms that she is the poison blighted and has been spreading poison from her birth. She introduces herself as Ren, and the moth flying near her dies and disintegrates because of her poison. Rin curiously lifted her foot and began to try to break Lloyd's boundary. She then informed Lloyd that he had not consumed a deadly amount of her poison, so he will just be unwell for a few days. With that, she vanishes from the garden, leaving Lloyd amazed by her entire abilities. Suddenly, Grim comes there and asks him if he is fine. Lloyd reveals that he is using a high-level spell called Healing Breath to heal his body quickly, so he is not in any kind of danger. He believes that Ren is a member of the Assassin's Guild that Silpha had told him about earlier. At this point in a deserted house, the assassins were meeting, and the boss was blaming Ren for returning empty-handed. But Ren also brought back important information. The royal family was mass-producing magic swords. Meaning war was approaching, this information would help the boss plan ahead. Ren believes that they can have a chance to participate in the war, but the big man tells her to shut up. He is pissed that she is acting like their true leader, who has run away. While the two of them fight, the pink-haired notices that they have company, and Lloyd decides to stop hiding now that someone has spotted him. The thieves recognize him as the 7th prince who acts like a normal child, but is in fact very powerful. The big guy wants to kill him so that he doesn't leak information about them. And on hearing this, Lloyd removes his barrier, giving Grim a heart attack. However, Lloyd laughs, saying that it would be a shame if he doesn't get to experience the special skills of the Assassin's Guild members. A green-haired man attacks him first. Lloyd quickly blocked his kick. He disappeared, then he reappeared like a demon, kicked once, but made 3 kicks. Lloyd defended perfectly, but the assassin stretches and curves his hand. Landing a hit on him, the assassin then twists his body around, introducing himself as the Blighted Babylon. Lloyd is amazed to see this when suddenly, the masked assassin appears behind him and tells him to sink. Immediately, Lloyd feels super heavy and falls to his knees under his own weight. The big bald guy comes forth and says that the masked guy is called Crow. Lloyd uses physical enhancement magic to break free from Crow's cursed speech and avoid the heavy attack from the bald guy named Galilei. However, he immediately gets caught in his real ability. Lloyd strains to get out of the sticky web and is forced to leave his shirt behind to get free. The pink-haired assassin attacks him from behind, but he blocks her twin swords using the fabric he borrowed from Babylon. He dodges all her attacks, and the pink-haired girl suddenly stabs her thigh. Surprisingly, a similar wound appears on Lloyd's thigh, and the woman introduces herself as Teria, who can share her injuries with anybody she sees. Lloyd can only smile like a fool while learning how her abilities work. He uses healing magic to quickly heal his wound. Teria's wound also heals immediately. Lloyd strengthens the clothing shreds around his wrists and transforms them into blades. He imitates Silpha's combat technique and instructs the assassins to show their abilities. Lloyd targets the flexible man Babylon first, who barely dodges his first attack. He attacks him again and smashes him to the ground. Suddenly, Galilei and Crow surround Lloyd from both sides and try to launch a combo attack. But Lloyd moves faster than sound, avoiding his attack and letting it hit the Baldy instead. Lloyd appears behind Crow to finish him. He smashes Crow with a unique combination move and slams him to the ground instead. Galilei gets up to fight him, but Teria tells him to stop because they are linked together. He doesn't listen, and when he swings his fist, all of her clothes rip. Then Lloyd attacks her without warning. She stops the attack and warns him not to hurt her, or else he will be wounded as well. Lloyd is eager to learn this through hands-on experience and instantly blows Teria into a pillar. Golly comes up behind him and holds his hands, but Lloyd gives him the slip, and then uses Tao's techniques and sends Golly flying. Golly crashes right next to Ren, who falls to the ground in terror at Lloyd's unbelievable power. Lloyd gently told Rin to show him more of her poison. At this point, Galilea struggled to get up and told her to stop, because after all, Ren was not yet proficient in controlling her poison. He would fight with Lloyd on her behalf. Now Lloyd remembered. It seemed that this group, with all members, was not yet proficient in controlling magic. Galilea said that if they could control their power, they would not need to be assassins anymore, because being hunted down by the world was too tiring. He began to burst out with power and rushed to Lloyd. But Lloyd shot behind him, and like a powerful lightning strike, Ren screamed and attacked Lloyd with a kick. But unfortunately, Lloyd's boundary had been erected long ago. Lloyd reminded Ren that the poison was leaking out. Golly tells her to stop, because he is not injured at all. It turned out, after Lloyd's last strike, his mana was completely under his control. No one can believe it. And Lloyd explains that he engraved a spell on Golly's back so that he can control his mana properly. Golly cries tears of joy, saying that his cursed power has finally vanished, and Lloyd tells him that he can use his power at his will now. He then calls the rest of the assassins and engraves a spell on their bodies too. Afterwards, all of them now can control their power and are very happy. Soon, everyone welcomes Lloyd into their gang, and they even give him some of Ren's clothes that fit him perfectly. Ren is not happy about that and claims that he is their enemy, and Grim starts arguing with her about it. Lloyd doesn't care and asks everyone to show him their powers once more. But Galilei says that before that, they must explain themselves to him. Lloyd says that he is fine, but the bald dude has already started rambling about their past. However, as Lloyd learns about the Assassin's Guild's leader, Jade, who possesses teleportation abilities, he becomes enthralled with the story. Galilei believes that Jade has the worst power of them all because he can teleport anywhere at any time without his will. Despite this, he was the most cheery of them all, and proposed that they form the Assassin's Guild to take on missions that the Adventurers Guild would find too dirty. He came up with a coin with a sketch of a wolf, and said that every time they complete a mission, they will leave this coin at the location to prove to the world about their powers and their intentions to bring the world peace. He declared that one day, they would no longer have to live in the shadows, and the very next second, he got teleported. Lloyd is just interested in the part regarding teleportation. Suddenly, a teleportation circle emerges in front of him, and out of that comes a letter with the Assassin's Guild's wolf mark. A few hours later, Silpha and Shiro arrive at the Assassin's hideout to locate Lloyd. However, they don't discover a single human there. However, there is a message from Lloyd stating that he intends to visit the Lord of Lordost, their enemy territory, together with the Assassin's Guild. When Arthur receives this news, he cannot stop shivering in fear and anxiety. He believes that the King of Lordost must have ordered the Assassin's Guild to capture Lloyd and intends to declare war against them. Diane convinces him that Lloyd cannot be defeated so easily, and they ought to try to negotiate calmly. However, Silpha provides the dirty clothes belonging to Lloyd that she discovered in the cave, and upon seeing this, both Arthur and Silpha are ready for war. It turns out that the letter that the assassins received was from none other than their own leader, Jade, claiming that he was transported to the territory of Lordost, but he managed to perform a coup on the Lord who was trying to start a war and has named himself the Lord of that area. He then tells all of them to make their way to the manor so he can give them all a proper welcome. The assassins seem overjoyed and very emotional at this letter, as they thought their leader was lost. But now they seem very happy and ready to leave in an instant. Ren reached out and asked if Lloyd wanted to go with them. It turned out Ren wanted Lloyd to cure Jade too. Lloyd didn't say anything. Now he just picked up the letter and asked Rin if she knew where it came from. It meant it was instantly sent to the precise position needed. It indicated that Jade had completely mastered his ability. He had been lying the entire time. Ren immediately froze, and everyone wasn't sure whether to proceed to Lordost or not. Ren abruptly spoke up, speculating that Jade had mastered his abilities and escaped his curse in the last 6 months. Lloyd smiled and said he didn't have to accompany these people, but the teleportation seemed interesting, so he would go along. They thank Lloyd as he decides to take them all for a ride on his supersonic air magic. He travels at the speed of sound while the assassins are screaming for mercy as they have never traveled this way at such high speeds. Finally, Lloyd stops in a forest where the assassins take a deep breath as some of them feel motion sickness. Ren claims that she will get them some food and rushes off inside the forest to hunt some wild game. Babylon tells Lloyd that Ren appears to want to impress Lloyd with her forest skills, which she mastered after her poison curse killed her parents, leaving her to live alone in the forest and take care of herself. One day, when Jade was mysteriously teleported, he returned with her wrapped in a tight ball. As he explained that she is blighted with poison, the others were concerned and warned him that she may be dangerous if she was unable to control her poison. Jade would have none of it as he snuggled and rubbed her all over his face, calling her cute before vomiting blood out of his mouth. Lloyd touches the cloak that Jade engraved and tells Gali that he would like to meet this person. When finally Ren reappeared and cooked some food for them, Lloyd began to sleep on Galilea's shoulder while the group continued to move. Grimm reminds them that Lloyd is a monster, as he is still maintaining an incredibly strong barrier in their sleep. Ren suddenly commanded everyone to leave Lloyd behind. Galilea agrees that they should scout out the area before taking the prince in, so they place him on a flower bed to sleep while they decide to move on. Ren asks Grimm to protect Lloyd, but he informs them that Lloyd is invincible even when sleeping. It would also be good if he joined them to ensure that everything was fine. They enter the castle and discover an incredible celebration going on, and Grimm can't detect any negative coming from them. Suddenly, an egg-headed man approaches them and asks whether they are Jade's friends. Terrier responds that they are, and the egghead promptly takes them to the party. With a bang, he puts them down at the table and instantly pours them drinks. Suddenly, Jade comes out in his lord's attire. He cheerfully greets the others as he approaches them. He changes his outfit to make them feel better, and they all walked towards him with tears in their eyes. Meanwhile, Grim gently flew away. Suddenly Jade's smile changes and uses his insane magic to force them to the ground. The pressure is incredible as Jade laughs at them for falling for his trick. Suddenly, everyone surrounding them starts turning demonic. Jade looked at Rin and began to try to remember her name but gave up. He only remembered she was the poison girl. This sentence broke Rin's heart. Grim shot out a dark vortex to rescue everyone. He yelled loudly to run with Lloyd, but Jade appeared behind him and delivered such an insane kick that he fell near Lloyd, barely creeping towards him as he tries to inform Lloyd what just happened. Back at the castle, Ren tried not to believe what she was seeing, wanting to ask Jade again what was going on. The demons laughed hoarsely, and then from their mouth, black demons began to emerge. Galilea recognized these as once rumored in the human world, a psychic life form who could take over the host's body. Jade introduced himself as coming from the demon world, a place far from the ocean, outside this continent. He said that what attracted him here was something wonderful. It was this body, the poor body of Jade. He also introduced himself as Gisarm, and he boldly declared that Jade was dead, and he had taken over this body. It took months to wear him down, but he finally took control of his body after Jade tried to kill himself in order to protect his friends. Unfortunately for him, Gisarm healed him in an instant, and no matter how many times he tries. Gisarm healed him and finally took control of his body and his teleportation powers. Ren tries to scream at him with anger. He destroyed the clip that Jade gave her. He picks her up by the head and makes fun of how she killed her own parents when he notices a weird mark on her arm, which wasn't there in Jade's memories. He asks who the hell put the mark on her, but she wouldn't answer. Gisarm starts using his mind control ability to seek the answer, but Ren simply bites her own tongue. When suddenly a huge amount of mana surrounds the assassins, covering them in a shell while a massive energy beam levels the entire area. As all the demon spawn disappear, the assassins look up thankfully to see Lloyd with a serious face looking down and say he was the one who put the mark. He descends down to the ground, and he immediately starts checking out Ren's injuries and heals her mouth, asking why she would try something like biting her own tongue. Lloyd tells them to run away as quickly as possible, as he will handle the rest. Golly grabs Ren and starts making a run for it and tells her that this is beyond their level. The demons in the area are horrified to see the huge crater, not knowing whether their lord Gisarm died or not. Gisarm suddenly appears behind one of the demons, pushing him into the crater filled with lava as he looks at them with contempt, asking what the hell they are looking at. He orders them to chase after them and threatens to kill them. A few brave demons rush to Lloyd to kill him, while at the same time Gisarm used his cursed speech to try and kill Lloyd. The attacks get blocked by his barrier, but the cursed speech manages to slip through the barrier, which ends up hitting the demon behind him and immediately takes his life. Lloyd immediately uses his magic to take a closer look at the inner workings of the spell and realizes that this cursed speech is not a spell but a huge ball of mana itself, which not only killed the body but also the demon possessing it via cardiac arrest. Grimm said that the demon also has ranks. If ranked below 10, then magic can also affect them. Pazuzu is at rank 8 while Grimm is at rank 3. This guy is above all, a noble demon in the demon world. Gisarm immediately grabs a piece of mana into a shard and shoots it towards Lloyd. The shard almost penetrates through, which scares the crap out of Grimm, as this was Lloyd's heavy-duty barrier with multiple shields that stopped Grimm's strongest attacks without a problem. Gisarm gets excited to see how strong Lloyd is, and this time creates innumerable spears of dark mana, which he shoots at lightning-fast speed towards him. The barrier takes a bunch of spears before breaking, but Lloyd immediately creates another one. A chase ensues, as Gisarm keeps shooting spears of mana at him, while Lloyd keeps creating new barriers and trying to dodge as many hits as he can. But after a while, Gisarm teleports on top of Lloyd and kicks the barrier away. While dozens of black spears were rushing towards him, Gisarm controlled them to twist into one body. Unexpectedly, a huge mound of earth sprouted from the ground. It blocked this drill for Lloyd. Meanwhile, the assassins are still here watching the match. Even the demons are standing there watching. It turns out that Galilea was waiting for Babylon to open the door to escape inside. Gizarm creates 1,000 more spears and asks Lloyd, what will he do now? Whether he will block, dodge, or simply run away. Before Lloyd could even think, Gizarm used a dirty trick and teleported his spear behind him, stabbing Lloyd straight in the heart. He doesn't even stop at that, and within a moment stabs Lloyd with multiple spears as he lays there still and unmoving. The demons had chased the assassins to their location, but at this point, Galilei was no longer the same. He could comfortably control his magic power, instantly creating a path full of sticky glue. Crow took a deep breath and struck. The demons were immediately forced to sink into the pile of sticky glue. Meanwhile, Babylon manages to find the lever and pushes it hard, opening the gate a bit. He screams at them to run through so he can close it. However, the demons use their powers to break through the spells and begin chasing them once more. The assassins run away, but Teria stays behind and uses her magic to slash herself on the foot, causing all the demons to fall down as well. Galilei shouts for her to go, but she asks him to leave her left because she will keep them from chasing them. The demons insult her talents, claiming that they can easily regenerate. But without hesitation, she stabs her other feet, forcing all of them down. Galilei immediately pushes Crow and Ren out of the gate, shuts it behind him, and approaches Teria. He believes she can't handle them alone, but Teria reveals that she had a plan to end her life with the sword. Galilei claims that he already knew this and tells her that he is willing to die alongside her. Ren pleads for them to join her because she cannot bear the thought of them dying. The monsters panic as they understand that if this woman commits suicide, they would all perish alongside her, so they begin running towards her. But Galilei stops them with his webs as Talia thinks about how many times Jade tried kill himself. Gizarm looked at this scene and felt disgusted. He looked down at Lloyd, who was silent like a dead body, and said that he should be more interesting. Then Lloyd's whole body turned into dust. Lloyd appeared in midair and was holding a sword in his hand. He tries to slice his head off, but Gizarm managed to teleport away at the last moment. He is happy that Lloyd is still alive to entertain him. Lloyd calmly asks whether they can move this fight somewhere else. Suddenly, a bunch of archers and mages start shooting magic fire arrows at the lower-class demons, which shocks Ren as she doesn't understand what's happening. Suddenly, the main gate is sliced, and Albert walks through with his sword drawn, followed by Silva and everyone else. Ren cries out in relief as Albert tells his men to move forward and destroy any demons that come in their way. The demons are set ablaze, and Ren is relieved that help is finally here. Albert and Silva hear it, and they turn around to give them a death stare. Soon, the assassins are on their knees, shivering in terror. Silva points her sword at them and asks them where Lloyd is. They freak out, and then Silva pulls out a pocket watch, telling them that for each lie they tell her, she will kill one of them. Ren replies that he is fighting the boss of the demons for them, but Babylon shuts her mouth, reminding them of what Lloyd had asked them to promise earlier. Earlier, when they were eating, the sleepy Lloyd had asked them to keep his strength and grim a secret from the people of the palace. Silva tells them that their 1 minute of silence is almost over. So Ren panics and says that Lloyd is fighting a total loser right now. The others also try to back up her claim, but Silva doesn't trust them at all. She intends to take Ren's life first, but Albert stops her. He takes out Lloyd's underwear, which they discovered at the assassin's headquarters, and questions why Lloyd would fight for those who dared to strip him naked. Galilei claims that the clothing was just covered in his fluids, so he let them dry. Albert and Silva are in full murder mode now, but Ren stands up to them. She admits that they would not believe outcasts like them so easily, and she is ready to accept any punishment they give out. However, she wants them to believe her just one time. Suddenly, a demon-possessed human attacks her. Out of nowhere, Princess Elise comes there riding her majestic fox and saves Ren. Elise says that they can trust Ren, because if she had any intentions, Loru would gobble her up first. Albert decides to trust his sister's word and claims that the demons are their new priority now. He orders Silva to find Lloyd and retrieve him. Suddenly, some dark energy spears rain down on them. The bridge is destroyed. At this point, the demons knocked into the water began to swim to land. Up in the air, Gizarm and Lloyd had finished their work. They did not want anyone to interfere in their fight. After saying that, Lloyd held his sword and rushed away. At this point, everyone could take care of themselves so he could fully concentrate and fight a battle. Below, Albert's army was firing dozens of fireballs into the mouths of the demons. But Diane also realized this intermediate magic could not do anything to them. Magic swords consume the magic power of their users. They should have let Silpha and Rin join in close combat to support. Suddenly, Silpha was nowhere to be seen. Unexpectedly, she had climbed onto Shiro's back and told it to fly to the owner. Shiro didn't know how to fly. Galilea's group was discouraged because clearly in this situation wanting to get to Lloyd was impossible. Unexpectedly, Shiro tried to jump over, but the result was that it fell into the water and started to float aimlessly. Suddenly, someone climbs up the bridge and attacks her. She dodges the first attack and then draws her swords to block the rest of them. The attacker turns out to be the Humpty Dumpty demon, who praises Silpha's skill. He declares that while his associates here are just 10th class demons, he is an 8th class demon, as well as a practitioner of the demon blade technique. Thinking about the class system among demons, Silpha wonders what class Pazuzu was in. However, it does not matter, because Humpty seems quite weaker than him. On the other hand, Albert is still wondering if there is a way to save the people possessed by the demons, when a demon launches a surprise attack on him. Surprisingly, Babylon arrives to save the prince and kill the demon. Albert thanks him and then remarks that he didn't even hesitate dealing such fatal damage to the demon. At this moment, the assassins and the royal army needed to join forces. Albert also knew that Babylon had not hesitated to help him at that time. The demon was twisting its body and trying to move. Babylon further announced that these people were no longer salvageable. Their brains were completely dead, and now they were just vessels for the demons. Albert realized something. After these words, it meant that the leader of them had also died. But let it go. Albert extended his hand and performed magic. Countless brilliant orbs appeared in the sky. This was the ultimate skill of heavenly fire, destroying everything. Silpha, on this side, used 2 spinning swords and rushed to attack the demon. But he had an extraordinary physique. Easily dodged, the two continued to entangle each other and exchange sword techniques, fighting to the point of heaven and earth shaking. Next, they use a special move and charge at each other with full speed. They separate after that, and as Silpha lands, blood starts flowing down from her forehead. Humpty Dumpty has also taken an equal amount of damage, but he can easily recover thanks to his demonic powers. He begins laughing, saying that humans can never beat demons. However, he admits that Silpha is strong, which is why he wants her body now. He immediately changes stance and charges Silpha with the Lordost sword technique. Even though she manages to avoid the attack, her dress is cut off. Humpty claims that the previous master of this body was hardworking and excellent in martial arts. He showed his calloused hands, demonstrating how hard he must have worked. He declares that humans are only clothing for demons like himself, and he plans to take over Silpha. Silpha doesn't take those words well, and she leaps into the air and uses the demonic technique that Humpty used a while back. He is shocked to see her using that move and barely blocks it at the last moment. He is terrified that Silpha also knows demon sword technique, but she tells him that she just learned it by watching, because she is not so pathetic that she can't learn another style without taking over someone's body. Humpty is furious at this insult, but Silpha doesn't mind him. Instead, she calls to Shiro, who climbs back to her side. She begins scouring through its fur and finally finds a special sword that Lloyd personally made for her. As she draws the blade, she tells Humpty to bear witness to what humans can achieve. Hearing this, the rank 8 demon laughed and burst out with demonic power and declared that this country would soon be under their invasion, the Nightmare Army. According to him, Jade was the opening factor for this war in the original plan. Then the war from Lodost would spread all over the world. Ren heard and rushed in angrily, but Silpha just smacks her, telling her that she's getting in her way. Silpha turned the sword and created a standing posture. She said that the future nightmare will not be able to become reality. The demon laughed loudly and sarcastically said, "Then let me teach you a lesson with my 6th Heavenly Demon King sword skill." Silpha draws her blade, slashes him, and then sheaths it back before he can even blink. Humpty's body is split into many small parts. Silpha covers her sword in a delicate lace, and then glances back at the dead body of her enemy, looking absolutely cold and menacing. Silpha walks towards him and says that before his body was taken over by a demon, he must have been a respected warrior and swordsman, and she would have loved to spar against him. Suddenly, an explosion takes place behind them, and in the very next moment, the entire area is filled with high-temperature steam. A few minutes earlier, as Lloyd was flying in the air, Gisarm sent discs made of his dark energy spears after him. Lloyd dodged them as he flew close to the river, but felt that he needed to come up with another strategy to face them. At this time, he activated the acceleration chant and then performed a dual magic, scorching fireball combined with petrified rock. He creates a giant flame golem that heads towards Gisarm with a punch, but because he didn't want to burn his clothes, he dodged. Lloyd quickly used the skill to track presence to find him. He had found his location and wondered what he was doing there. But he had to move quickly because he could use teleportation to attack him unexpectedly. At this time, Lloyd remembered the time he sent the invitation card, and he also inadvertently said that he couldn't find the people and the assassins if they escaped. So the conclusion is that this guy is not very good at teleportation positioning, and this demon just used his eyesight to use spatial skills. Gisarm is walking on the ground, unable to see a single thing. He thinks it was a smart move on Lloyd's side to evaporate the river, but he just needs to wait for the steam to pass. However, Lloyd has already gotten behind him. Gisarm notices him, but Lloyd summons an army of clones made with earth magic. Gisarm can't tell which one of them is real, so he lets himself get hit on purpose. Gisarm realizes which one of them attacked him with a real blade, and he guesses it is the real Lloyd. His injury heals rapidly, and he smirks while saying that using physical attacks on him will be useless too. Suddenly, he notices that the body he attacked earlier was also a clone. Suddenly, Lloyd launched a magic attack straight into him. He quickly made his clones move and shuffled them to hide his position. Lloyd said that this plan of his seemed to be effective. However, Gisarm quickly regenerates from the damage to his body and snaps his fingers and teleports a fresh pair of clothes. Gisarm raised his hand and created thousands of black spears. They simultaneously launched in all directions, destroying most of the puppets. Lloyd's main body had to activate a protective shield. He teleports behind him and crushes his head, but it turns out to be a clone too. At this moment he was even more excited because he knew his opponent was not an ordinary one. The real Lloyd is approaching him quietly, using an invisibility spell. Earlier, Lloyd informed Grimm that he named the sword spell taker. Lloyd can use this sword to absorb any spell and earn extra mana from it, as well as to readily understand its structure. Lloyd slashes through the teleportation magic circle, still hiding from Gisarm. The sword begins to decode the teleportation spell, and he suddenly finds himself in a space with nothing but magical symbols surrounding him. He calls out to Jade, asking if he is still here. He tells him that Ren and others are here, and he also wants to be his friend. Suddenly, Lloyd sees a bright space in front of him that suppresses the dark magic symbols into small pockets. Seeing this mesmerizing sight, Lloyd finally understands about the teleportation magic and what he should do next. Suddenly, all his clones turn to stone, and he removes the invisibility spell cast on himself. Gisarm is surprised to see that Lloyd was hiding using an invisibility spell. He believes that Lloyd has realized that he can't win against him. Lloyd smiles, saying that all magic spells are rooted in desire, and desires are infinite. Gisarm says that he doesn't care and teleports to attack Lloyd. However, Lloyd quickly counters him and punches him in the gut as soon as he appears next to him. Gisarm can only scream in pain as his bones get crushed. Lloyd mocks him, saying that he didn't even use mana in the previous strike. It was simply a punch infused with Kai. Lloyd, however, asks him if he remembers what the last thing Jade told him before dying. Gisarm thinks back to the time the shriveled and desperate Jade told him that he would lose just before he died. This infuriates Gisarm to no end, and he curses Jade and Lloyd as he teleports to attack. Lloyd kicks him just as he appears next to him, and Gisarm is sent screaming and rolling on the ground. He tries teleporting away, but Lloyd is there too, and he kicks him in the mouth. Gisarm tries to calm down and rethink his strategy, but Lloyd gives him no chance. Gizarm teleports away again, but Lloyd knows exactly where he is going to appear and kicks him in the face just as he appears there. Lloyd uses double casting to launch a powerful attack at him. The attack pushes Gizarm through the wall of the castle and into the hole Lloyd created with his introductory attack. Then Lloyd's kick sends him down towards the magma underneath. He knows that falling into magma will be too much even for him, and he tries teleporting away. However, Lloyd is present at every place he teleports to and keeps hitting him up into the sky. He then asks the battered Gizarm if he has no other tricks left up his sleeve, because then he will have to die. Gizarm finally snaps and tells Lloyd to not underestimate a demon lord, as he reveals his ultimate technique. As a demon lord, he can freely manipulate the mana in the atmosphere, and he gathers it above him, condensing it into a giant black ball. Gizarm threw the Black Death ball to Lloyd but seemingly disappeared. He was terrified not knowing what had happened. It seemed Lloyd had done something. He said he had sent it somewhere else. Gizarm thought Lloyd had used a similar move to neutralize, but not. He had used space magic called Void. It turns out a long time ago Lloyd had learned this skill. He experimented with making various things disappear, then let these voids collide with each other. Hearing this part, the demon was scared to death. He even created a ball that was already scary enough. Finally, the result of the experiment on that was these voids annihilated each other. Lloyd told the demon that the feeling in that experiment was also similar to the feeling he had for the demon at this moment. The demon heard and went crazy. The Black Death Ball is a unique skill of the demon species. He decided to seize this body of Lloyd as a souvenir. But Lloyd didn't care what this guy was barking. The demon had appeared right behind. He just touched Lloyd's hair. Immediately saw another space. Dark and terrifying pressure. Two endless dead eyes were staring at him. Lloyd, with a face as cold, turned back and said, "Would you die if I used Void to kill you?" Immediately countless Void balls flew over. It began to absorb the demon Gizarm, but he didn't feel anything. His body began to fade according to the absorption progress of the Void ball, similar to his Black Death ball. The people below were still immersed in the fog. They tried to use their hearing to fight. At this time, Silpha and the demons began to rampage because they have a very sensitive nose. Suddenly she detected a fragrance, intending to follow it, but Ren stopped her because it was poisonous. Silpha just felt that this girl seemed to like to show off her body more. At this time, everyone saw something strange. It was daytime, but why did it get so dark? Everyone curiously looked up. The dark sky appeared to have two huge dead eyes. Gizarm here was being torn apart. He screamed in horror because at this moment he could no longer regenerate. Even the magic power was being absorbed. So he decided to throw this body away, but didn't know why the body bit him tightly and wouldn't let go. Grim looked at this scene, and tears flowed. Jade was sacrificing herself to die with the demon. Jade suddenly screamed and said that he was Jade here. Consciousness had returned. He lied that Gizarm had disappeared because of his attack, meaning let him go because the demon was dead, but Lloyd continued to control the ball to expand. Knowing that he had failed in deceiving Lloyd, he began to scream and order his assassin minions to kill Lloyd. Then he completely disappeared, right where the two void balls collided. Even the dust was gone. Lloyd felt like Jade's soul was here trying to thank and smile, then disappeared in the light. Everyone below was dazzled. They knew that everything had been resolved. Ren suddenly remembered the memories with Jade in the past, when Jade told them the urban legend about the seventh prince. A baby born was given the power to shoot through the mother castle. He hoped that one day the seventh prince would come to destroy this shabby place. Destroy their curse. Ren really felt funny when Jade showed a lot of faith in it. At this time her tears were falling. Everything had ended. After the battle, Lloyd sets up a grave for Jade, but Grim points out how far it is from everyone else's. Lloyd explains that the void consumes everything, and there was nobody to bury for Jade, so this is more of a memorial. Grim is impressed that Lloyd was even able to land void since it moves so slowly. He created a spell to detect whenever it was being used and attached it to his reflexes so he could dodge and pursue it automatically. Grim can't believe that Lloyd deciphered such a complex spell during a crazy battle, but Lloyd concedes that it was very reckless. This was because at the very end, Jade managed to transcribe a complete spell for Shadow Wolf, and he left it behind, knowing that someone would rise to the challenge of finding a way to overcome it. Lloyd declares that he did not win this fight. Jade did. Ren listens nearby, and his words make her emotional. She wants to let Lloyd know how grateful she is, but Albert arrives to speak with him. Lloyd tries to hide who the grave is for, but Albert already knows that it's for the leader of the Assassin's Guild. Albert doesn't have the story completely right, so Lloyd realizes that the assassins must have cooked up a story to protect his secret. Albert still knows that Lloyd defeated a demon alone, so he's proud of how strong and kind his little brother is. Unfortunately, the Assassin's Guild has to be taken into custody. Ren awaits the same fate as soon as they find her. The assassins have done some pretty bad stuff in their past, and now they just took a prince and forced him into war. However, they vowed to make amends by serving Lloyd for the rest of their lives. They are so determined to make things right that Albert doesn't think they have to be restrained. Just then, everyone is shocked when Albert puts a sword on Lloyd and tells him how serious the situation is. If the assassins become his retainers and they commit some terrible act, then Lloyd will be held responsible. The assassins fear that Lloyd won't want them, but Lloyd decides that he will take full responsibility for them. Lloyd is sure that this is what he wants, and everyone is surprised when a gust of wind blows at this very moment. Albert wants to make sure that Lloyd knows that people care about him, so he tells him not to be so distant. Albert tells Lloyd how much he loves him, and everyone watches the nice moment. Just then, Tao comes out of nowhere to wonder if Lloyd and Albert are okay. However, she can tell that the fight is over because of the grave and everyone's blank stare. Tao runs off ashamed of herself, but the others go after her to thank her for the other day. A while later, a tea party is held, but Tao is really nervous because of all the royalty there. Albert assures her that she can relax, but Tao gets a bit too comfortable and ends up paying the price when she calls Silpha a stupid maid and tells her to give her some tea. A couple of partygoers get a bit tipsy and say goodbye to Jade. Talia wishes that Albert would have a drink, but he points out that he's conducting official business by watching the assassins. Everyone is having a blast, but they realize that Ren isn't there. This is because the girls have returned to the castle and are using the steaming hot water as a bath. Ren declares that she wants to work alongside Lloyd the way Silpha does, but Silpha explains that Ren needs to ask Lloyd herself. Lloyd shocks Ren as he is there, and he allows Ren to be by his side. Ren questions if it would really be okay for her to be with Lloyd. She has hurt a lot of people in the past, and she is poisonous. Ren is shocked when Lloyd bluntly says that she has a lot to work on, and she should start improving by not calling herself blighted anymore. He explains that if she can learn to really understand her ability, then she might be able to become a pharmacist that makes medicine. Ren's mind is flooded by all the people that hated her entire life because of her poison, and she thinks about how much she hated herself because of it. Lloyd accepted it with no hesitation, and she just now realizes that Lloyd never called them blighted even once. Lloyd advises her to work really hard as he leaves, and Ren promises to do so. Later we watch as everyone prepares to meet with the king. Lloyd fears that he will be in trouble, but the king is actually really proud of his sons. Down in the basement, Grim cleans up, and he's happy to see that Lloyd is doing what he loves most, learning more about magic. Thank you for watching till the end, and please don't forget to subscribe. See you next time and peace out.